Welcome back to the West Virginia Legislature on the West Virginia Channel. I'm Beth Voorhees. The House is set to go in at 4 o'clock this afternoon. However, the House Finance Committee is still in session and still just now taking up amendments to Senate Bill 1013. That's the budget bill. Yesterday, this bill passed in the Senate in one day without amendment. It moves to the House now. It's in the House Finance Committee, and the committee members are going through it and making some amendments to it. So it's likely that this recess will be longer than 4 o'clock. Of course, today the governor released the following statement regarding the fiscal year 2017 budget negotiations. The statement reads, "As part of the ongoing budget negotiations, many members of the legislature have expressed a desire to assist PEIA recipients in avoiding greater increases in their premiums. I agree with their concern, and if the legislature passes my proposed tobacco tax, I plan to amend the special session call to include two additional pieces of legislation. One would provide $15 million in additional general revenue funds that would be directed to PEIA. The second would be a supplemental appropriation that allocates that $15 million by using $5 million to reduce the PEIA premium increase for retirees from 12% to 6%, with an additional $10 million allocated to PEIA to help reduce benefit cuts or premium increases that may be necessary in fiscal year 2018. These additional measures, if passed, would help strengthen the financial stability of our PEIA system and help our teachers, state employees, and retirees in meeting their premiums." That statement was just released this afternoon, and the House Finance Committee is meeting now and weighing in on this compromise, this deal, so it's possible that the House will take a little longer to get into session this afternoon. But we want to show it to you. The House did move up two bills today to first reading. Senate Bill 1012, that's the tobacco tax bill. That will be on second reading in the House tomorrow. And Senate Bill 1011, that has to do with reducing the amounts of deposits into the West Virginia Infrastructure Fund. So those two bills will be on second reading in the House tomorrow. The Senate will not go into session until 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. So wait with us as we wait for the House floor session to begin. The House Finance Committee has just adjourned. They have passed an amended version of the budget bill that passed the Senate yesterday on a 23-2 vote. So members should be making their way into the chamber very, very shortly. This bill was amended in committee. Therefore, when it passes the House, it will have to go back to the Senate in order to consider the changes that the House made to this bill. So the House Finance Committee has adjourned, and members will be making their way to the floor very shortly, and we will bring you today's House floor session as soon as it's gavelled in by House Speaker Tim Armstead. Please stand by. This is the West Virginia Legislature on the West Virginia Channel. I'm Beth Voorhees. We're still waiting for this afternoon floor session for the House of Delegates to begin. The House Finance Committee has just approved with amendment Senate Bill 1013, that is the budget bill. It passed 23-2 in House Finance Committee. The House Finance Committee adjourned some 30 minutes ago, and we're still waiting for House Speaker Tim Armstead to come to the floor and to gavel in this late afternoon floor session. It's likely not much is going to happen as the committee report will be given that this bill is passed. This budget bill has been approved by the House Finance Committee. It might be put up to first reading, but we'll see what the House does in regards to these measures that the Senate passed yesterday. So bear with us. We're waiting for the House delegates to convene its afternoon floor session.
House will be in order. Gentleman from the 58th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to return to the third order of business for the purpose of receiving committee reports.
Gentleman from the 58th asks unanimous consent to return to the third order of business for the purpose of receiving committee reports. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Reports of standing committees.
Your Committee on Finance has had under consideration Senate Bill 1013, the budget bill, and reports the same back with amendment with the recommendation that it do pass as amended.
Message be received. Gentleman from the 58th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent the bill be taken up for immediate consideration and read a first time.
Gentleman from the 58th asks unanimous consent the bill be taken up for immediate consideration and read a first time. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Clerk, please read the bill first time.
Senate Bill 1013.
Bill be advanced. Leaves of absence. Gentleman from the 58th.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. For our colleagues, delegates Ellington, Faircloth, Flanagan, Manchin, J. Nelson, Skinner, Spinagle, Weld, and B. White.
Without objection, leaves will be granted. Remarks by members of the House. Gentleman for the 22nd, Delegate Moffitt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you for those who have already heard my pitch in regards to the Boone County issue. On your desk in front of you, and I know some of you have said they agree with the issue, they disagree with the issue, or have questions, and I want to go through and explain it to everybody. The governor introduced HB 119 on June 2nd. And on June 1st, we first got the notice that a bill was coming. On June 2nd, we got the information hours before we were to leave town. It appeared to me that it was just a straight bailout bill of Boone County schools, and even though I represent Boone County, I could not support that. June 3rd, I went down to Boone County and have been digging around ever since to try to find out what the real deal is. It does affect Boone County schools, but it really is a tax collection issue down in Boone County. If everyone looks at the sheet they have on their desk, it shows that Boone County collects $24 million in taxes. They collect $28 million in taxes. They've collected $17 million this year, 60% of their revenues, 60% of what's due. They still have uncollected, with weeks to go, $11 million in taxes. Now, usually they collect 96, 97%, so it was quite an oddity for them. Looking into it further, you see that $8 million of this is tied up in professional bankruptcies from Alpha, Patriot, Raven, Falcon, Briar Creek, and the list goes on. That adds up to about 29% of their total tax collection. So 29% of the money they accounted for in their school aid formulas, 29% of the money they accounted for in their budgeting for 2016, 29% of the money that they expected to go towards their local share of the schools has not come in. It may come in, it's tied up in bankruptcy court, and they may see it, they may never see it. West Virginia Code 189A 12B3, which is on the back of the sheet and highlighted as the section we're looking at, states that in times where court proceedings hold up money, that the state aid formula can be adjusted and that the state can make up the portion of the local share that's tied up. That portion, according to HB 119, is $2,174,591. Now, some people are saying, well, Boone County's been over budget for years. They've had too many teachers for years. They've had too many service personnel. I'm not arguing that. They have been over formula. They've had money to cover their operations. Now, they continue to operate their schools in the past the way they thought best. They do collect the maximum amount of the school levy, so they are funding their schools. But now, due to these bankruptcies, the sheriff is not collecting the money, and the money is not being forwarded to the Boone County schools. Boone County did cut 77 positions. They have closed 4 facilities for the 2016-2017 school year. They do know that additional cuts will be needed for the 17-18 school year. They are still slightly over formula after their numbers were run this year. But the real issue here is not are we bailing out Boone County schools, but are we following the state code on advancing the money that can be used for their local share. And I've talked to some of you who said, well, this county is hurting, that county is hurting. And yes, many of our counties are hurting. I'm lucky to live in Putnam County where our school board is collecting their money and operations are running pretty well. But that's not true for many parts of the southern part of the state and even parts of the central and northern part of the state. We are all hurting in various ways. But when you don't have 29% of your taxes coming in due to professional bankruptcies, that is not including any kind of personal bankruptcies that are going on as well, you can't continue to operate. So I'm going to propose an amendment to the governor's bill, HB 119, that we put in the language that it is a loan, that the money may be paid back through the bankruptcy courts, but it may also not come back through the bankruptcy courts. We don't know how much money will come back because it's in bankruptcy proceedings. And I'm also going to put in that bill that we do this for, and I'm up to suggestions here, when either 20, 25, or some amount of money, some amount of your tax collection is not available, that this section of code 189A12B3 can be applied. Because otherwise it will be every state that has, every county that has some issue will say, well, I have a $100,000 bankruptcy here, I need some more money. I have a $1 million bankruptcy here, I need some more money. This is 29% of their total tax revenue. So if you guys can digest this, look at it, if you have more questions, come see me. Delegate Nelson has reviewed it as well as Delegates Eldridge, Rodigario, and Phillips. And all five of us, obviously not Delegate Nelson, he's not here, are more than willing to answer questions and more than willing to discuss the issue. But again, it's not a personal issue. Some people have said, well, you didn't support my bill way back when, so I can't support your bill. Well, I'm sorry people feel that way. This is a real issue that affects the tax collections of this county. The repercussions are going to be that on June 24th, if they don't get the money, the teachers and service personnel in Boone County will not get paid. Paid for the school year that's already been completed, paid for services already rendered. So we've asked the Attorney General if we can borrow money from the bank to cover us till July 1st. That's not an option because we're taking money from one year and doing it for another year. They've looked at how much money they could pull together from various reserves and other operations, and they could possibly make up some of their payroll. But the real issue is it's a tax problem and a cash flow problem that this needs to be addressed. So I do ask for your support, and if you have any more questions about it, please come see me. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from the 44th, Doug Lynch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I was here yesterday, and the record reflects that I was not. And without objection, I would ask that I be shown as being present, and had I been in my seat, I would like for my vote to reflect a negative.
Just one second. Okay, House will be in order. To the gentleman, the journal will reflect that you were in fact present yesterday, and it will also reflect that had you been present at the time of the vote, that you would have voted in the negative on the vote to override the veto. Okay, thank you. The gentleman from 17th, Dr. Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just ask unanimous consent that the comments from my colleague from Putnam be printed in the appendix of the journal.
Without objection, remarks be printed in the appendix of the journal. Gentleman from the 25th, Doug Blackwell.
Just wanted to ask the gentleman from 22nd if he would yield.
Gentleman yield. Gentleman yields.
Being a school superintendent, we've been through some issues like this in our county. And I just wondered, has your prosecutor filed a lien against all of these bankruptcies? Because it could be settled and no taxes collected if he does not. So, you know, he needs to file a lien against every one of these companies if he hasn't done so. I just wanted to know if he had. The sheriff and the prosecutor have been both working on educating themselves on the bankruptcy process and how to go about making sure that they do have money coming in. So it's all a very new process to them, and they're looking for any advice we can give them on how to go about doing that. So they do intend to do that, yes.
Okay, I just suggest that they talk to the prosecutor and make sure that he's got the school system covered. Because otherwise there could be some transactions go on and the county not receive their funds.
And that's correct. And from what they told me as well, that they're third in line in bankruptcy proceedings. And again, I'm no bankruptcy expert,
Right.
but that's apparently they're third in line for collecting taxes. So,
Right. Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Gentleman from the 32nd, Doug Perry.
Would the gentleman continue to yield?
Gentleman yield. Gentleman yields.
Of course.
How many years has Boone County been out of the state aid formula? Do you have any idea?
I know it's been a while. I know they've been over formula for a long time. And again, while I'd like to tie the two together, and some people have suggested that they go into receivership with the state board, it really is a tax collection issue and a tax issue as opposed to just a school issue. Because if they had the $2.1 million of the local share flown from the sheriff's office, it would not be an issue.
Do you know if there's been state intervention from any way from the State Department of Education?
I've spoke with Amy Willard at the State Department. She is taking over for Joe Panetta. Joe Panetta, in his comments back on May 9th, said if the estimates were done more accurately by the state board, they would have received $3.5 million more in state aid this year than they received.
Did the gentleman also say they were still continuing to operate outside the state aid formula?
He said they were before they made the cuts, and they are yes, they are still slightly above. And I'm not defending that at all. I think that's wrong. They are still slightly above the state aid formula, but they have intentions to make those cuts next year.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
Further remarks by members? Miscellaneous business. Gentleman from the 58th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Subject to announcements, I move the House adjourn until noon tomorrow.
Are there announcements? If not, the question for the House is the motion by the gentleman from the 58th that the House stand adjourned until 12 noon tomorrow. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Declare the House adjourned until 12 noon tomorrow.